Hello there, John Coturillo here, the counsellor of your listener. Thank you for joining us for this episode, and as usual, thank you to everybody who makes this work possible. Today, it is my absolute pleasure to introduce Leah Ellis, all the way from the United States, of the Society of Child Entrepreneurs, and her daughter Melody. Today, we're going to be discussing Leah's work and what it can teach us about children's capacity to learn, to be a force for good, and to do what we normally assume that only adults could do if we don't think critically about the situation. But before we begin, as per usual, please do not take what you find on the internet or in the media as advice. If you have concerns for yourself or somebody else, please seek advice from a professional or somebody else that you trust. Leah and Melody, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you both.
Thank you so much for having us.
Leah, your work is incredibly inciting. You operate and were the founder of the Society of Child Entrepreneurs. It's a charity that teaches children the benefits of self-responsibility through practical learning about how to operate an ethical business, teaching associated values and ideas such as how to be financially responsible, how to be a responsible leader, how to plan effectively, how to be an effective member of a team, and the spirit that goes into being an ethical member of society. And I understand that you also operate events that allow children to start their own and operate their own small businesses and see how the market forces work. Tell us about what led us to this point.
So the answer to that is Melody. Long ago, in the midst of COVID, I was working on starting a business. I had some pivots because of COVID. And I'm watching these videos on our living room TV so that I can supervise my 1.5-year-old and my 4-year-old while I watch training videos and their dad is deployed for who knows how long in the midst of COVID. And while we were watching the videos, I'm learning. And then one day, 4.5-year-old Melody comes up to me and she says, "Mom, I want to start a business too." Like any reasonable parent, I looked at her and said, "No, you're 4. You can't start a business." And if you know anything about 4-year-olds worldwide, they all have the same favorite word: why. And I didn't have an answer for why she couldn't start a business because she wasn't doing anything else. We were trapped at home. So I asked her what she was going to do, how she was going to do it. We ran a poll in a Facebook group to even find a name for her business. And she launched at 4.5 years old, Melody Paints, and she created custom drip art. You simply filled out the colors you wanted on your art. She painted the painting for you and shipped it to your house. As COVID opened the world back up again, she did her first children's business fair with another organization. And she was really excited to be able to sell her products in public to strangers and make money and have strangers tell her they loved what she was making. And so we moved from the West Coast back to the Midwest, and I decided to host my own children's business fair as a way of trying to connect with other kids like Melody. And I realized when we did that fair that we're really good about giving the kids the opportunity to have this little fair and then terrible at any follow-up education. There was no day 2. There was no after-action review. There was nothing coming next to teach them how to make it better. So I convinced some friends to go off the rails with me, be a little bit crazy, and found a nonprofit where I could use my education background and my entrepreneurship experience to teach these kids financial literacy, entrepreneurship, leadership, all through their own businesses. So all of our members are business owners in their own right, but ranging from the ages of 6 to 17 years old. And so Melody is our junior executive director. So sometimes she even tells me no when it comes to lesson plans, and I have to rewrite plans based on what she wants to see the organization doing rather than what I want to do.
Tell us about the fairs that you currently operate. I understand that you operate regular events in which children can have small businesses, stalls. Tell us about these fairs, how they operate, what have you seen in them?
So 4 times a year, usually once per season, we do a children's business fair. So we partner with Acton Academy as one of our sponsors, and they run our application site for us. And these kids do their application, explain to us where they're getting their startup funds, how they're paying them back if they're getting loans. And then on the day of the event, they come in and it's just like a market. They set up their booths, they talk to their customers, they sell their product, If the child is over the age of 7, their parents are not allowed in the booth with them. So the parents actually have to spend time in the parent corner away from the kids. And the kids get to run their own business and do all of their own client outreach, talking about their products. Obviously, we have an artist like Melody, who's now even added graphic design to her business. We have a couple of kids who run 3D printing businesses. We have one. This is Melody just got excited because she's got a business she really loves. What is it? The business that you love?
It's called Choice Top 10, and he's mad about how not enough kids are reading. So he makes bookmarks and sells books and makes book recommendations.
Right. So Troy's Top 10 is a book recommendation company. He's a 13-year-old boy who you tell him your favorite genre, and he gives you 10 books in that genre so that he can get you to go and read something, because he was upset not enough of his classmates were readers like he was. And then one of my favorite things is, like you talked about, market forces. We usually have 2 or 3 baked goods kiddos. Usually, stereotypical little girls who come in and they make cookies or brownies or snacks of some type, and they all set up in the same room, which means we have usually about 10 to 15 vendors, and 2 or 3 of them might be direct competition to each other, all selling chocolate chip cookies. And they have to figure out what makes their chocolate chip cookie the one that you should buy. How is their business special? And so then it's really interesting to see how they set up their tables and how they work together to send customers to each other's businesses. We have one girl, her name is Gemma, and she sells Gem&M cookies, which are M&M chocolate chip cookies. Very clever. If she runs out of cookies, she'll send you across the way to Adeline's, and she'll say, well, I'm out. Adeline's got the next best cookies. And so it's great to see the camaraderie even as friendly competition.
You're making it as realistic as it possibly can be in the world out there.
Oh, absolutely. They are micro businesses, and they are junior directors of their own businesses. They are not little hobbyists who are only learning through pretend games. These are kids in a real market, and they're making real money.
As a counsellor, I receive referrals from others, and I also like to help my audience become aware of resources and other providers which may be beneficial, as well as help other individuals and organisations gain exposure. That's why I host the Your Listener Partner Network, and I'd like to thank my partners for their support. I'd like to introduce Jibeli Positive Pathways. Jibeli Positive Pathways is an NDIS registered provider specialising exclusively in positive behaviour support. They support children, young people and adults with disability who experience behaviours of concern, using evidence-based, person-centred and trauma-informed approaches. Their work focuses on understanding the functions of behaviour, reducing restrictive practices, and building meaningful skills and improving quality of life. They collaborate closely with families, support workers, schools, and services to ensure strategies are practical, consistent, and sustainable across everyday settings. Find them at www.jibelipositivepathways.com.au. Melody, I'd like to ask your input on this as the Junior Executive Director, because a lot of adults even assume that for a child, something big and scary like being in business, even something like the business fairs that your mother's organisation that your organisation runs, in which the children are asked to run the business on their own and their parents to stand aside and just let the children run their businesses. A lot of adults would assume, oh, that's too scary. You can't let a child do that. It would overwhelm them. And especially today, in today's society, we tend to assume that what's best for our children is to keep them comfortable rather than challenging them. And I imagine that for you, starting a business, even though you chose to do it, was a challenge. How do you feel about this essentially a big project, being a business person? How do you feel about it?
It's really fun trying to learn how to handle different problems and making new friends and partnerships, and while getting real money instead of having to do a billion chores to get this new toy that you really want.
So you find it fun when you come across a challenge, you come across a problem in business, and you're looking for a way to solve it. You find that process enjoyable?
Yeah, it's really fun. It lets your creativity kind of blossom a little more.
I imagine that you and your mother have discussed certain facts about business, like what can happen when things go wrong, or the fact that business is a big risk. Like every one of us, no matter what business we run, regardless of how many people want what we're selling, there's always some risk involved. How do you respond to those possibilities of there being risk in business, and how do you feel about that?
I wait for it to happen because there's no need to worry if it's like not even gonna happen. If it happens, then I try and come up with a solution. Doesn't work, try again.
What about like when you have to guess how much inventory to have for an event? And having too much inventory can be a risk, but having not enough inventory is a risk too. So how do you balance what decisions to make?
Well, I choose like two numbers, sort of, and then I go in between the two numbers.
Just kind of thinking about
Yeah.
making sure you estimate how many clients you've seen before to know how many customers to expect next time.
Yeah.
So effectively, even though you can't say for certain that something's going to happen, and you don't worry about it in advance, in the sense that it doesn't stop you from going out and being a business person. You don't let the risk stop you. You do plan, so you do know about the risk, and you try to take action in advance to lessen how bad it is for you if it does happen. So in effect, being a business person isn't just about making money. You learn so many different valuable life skills from it, and they transfer. And what a lot of people don't consider is that what you learn somewhere transfers into other parts of your life. So learning to plan in business means you learn to plan in your personal life. You learn to plan how to best budget your own money for your own purposes. You learn to best plan other aspects, your family, your relationships with people, how you're going to manage your own personal struggles in life if you have them. All sorts of areas of life require planning. Financial responsibility. A lot of people haven't been taught to manage money, and they think that all the things that they spend excessively on are things they actually need. But when they learn to financial responsibility, as you say, your creativity blossoms because you learn to make the most of life by spending less money. And you sometimes even find that life is more enjoyable when you're relying on your own creativity and your passion rather than your money.
And it reminds me, I have a story for you. A few months ago, Melody fell on the monkey bars and broke her wrist. And a few weeks after that, we had one of our monthly member meetings where our local members here in Kansas, we get together and we meet once a month and discuss business problems and how we can solve them. And I had written a lesson plan all about financial literacy and budgeting for business. I thought it was a great way to like end the year talking about business and everything like that. And I pulled up the lesson plans and I said, okay, Melody, I want you to review this because you're the junior executive director and we're going to go run this meeting soon. And she said, well, actually, Mom, I don't think this is what we should talk about. I really think that now is a good time for us to have a discussion on what to do when your business faces challenges. I can't use my right wrist right now, and I'm right-handed. So how do I continue running my business when I can't even write my name on a piece of paper? How do I do graphic design and paintings? What do I do with my business? So I rewrote all of our lesson plans for the day based on Melody's need and her recommendation as junior executive director to talk about how do we handle challenges in our business. And this isn't something that only applies to my child business owners. Even as an adult, our businesses run into problems. And we decided there are only 3 things you can do. You can pivot to some other option that you can do during your challenging time. You can pause your business and wait until you are able to recover. Or you can partner with another entrepreneur or another business owner and see if your 2 companies can work together while you're in recovery. So Melody then got to think about which of those options worked best for her, and all of our other child entrepreneurs got to plan for if something happened in their business, which of those options would work best for them.
Well done, both of you. That's an excellent plan. And Melody, good on you. You're really a planner, aren't you? You're a problem solver. And I like that of all the ideas that you formulated for that lesson plan, quitting was not one of them, which really shows people that even in the midst of a struggle, there are options and people can choose to take other options.
So we have some characters named Astra and Zeke, and they have some storybooks. And one of the stories that'll be coming in the future is about what happens if your business fails. And we talk about how the character in the book is trying to sell slime. but nobody buys it. Even her grandma walks by her booth and doesn't buy from her. And everybody knows grandma always buys. And so they're like, well, what do we do? How we failed. We need to shut down our business and never do it again. And Astra and Zeke coach her through, well, people like samples of slime. Whereas they able to sample your slime? Well, no, the lids were on too tight. Nobody could touch them. Well, people usually like to have slime, when they're sitting still. Well, I was right next to the swing set and the playground, so they were all playing on the playground. There wasn't really anywhere to play with slime. All right, well, so you've learned what doesn't work. Now's the opportunity for you to fail forward, make some changes, and try it again. So the character creates some sample tubs where you can sample her slime, even though the other jars are a little too hard to open. She moves it further from the playground and closer to the parking lot so you can grab your slime as you're leaving so the kids can play with it in the car while they're driving, while their parents are driving them around. And so even when you feel like you failed, have you really failed?
No, you're failing forward, which is just learning experience.
Fantastic. That is excellent. I'm curious to know about how the vast number of children that you've helped, and also the parents of them as well, what they've learned. I'm curious to know how people tend to respond to what you do, the people who participate and also people outside who don't have any involvement, who simply know about what you do. We often make a number of short-sighted assumptions about how people develop. One of them is we are innately predisposed to operating in a certain way. That is to say, if someone's going to be a failure, they were predisposed to be a failure from the start. They're lazy, they're stupid, whatever label people put on them, and they're never going to succeed. There's another assumption that environment is everything, and that if you place a child in the wrong environment from the start of their lives, no matter what happens afterwards, no matter how good an influence they find later, they are always going to embody the characteristics that were instilled in them from those early experiences. I'm wondering whether what you folks do has an opportunity to completely dispel or even at least challenge those myths, because I'm wondering if you've ever had children engage in the programs that you run who perhaps didn't show much potential from the start, or showed behavioral problems from the start of their lives, or perhaps just were showing tendencies that weren't healthy from the start of their lives, or perhaps had difficult upbringings from parents who didn't love them, who all of a sudden were able to turn around their lives and show potential because of the influence that you had on them. Have you found that there are children from a range of different backgrounds, both positive and negative, that have been able to respond well to what you do, thus demonstrating that there's a real importance in the type of influence that you have?
I have to tell you, I am the quintessential nature versus nurture child, because I did not meet my biological father till I was 26. So I had to, with no exposure to him or his family, but still developed many habits that his family also has developed, but also many habits from my stepfather who raised me. And I did have a stepdad who wasn't fond of who I was as a human being, and firmly believed that I was not going to achieve much in my life. And so I think part of this program is being able to say, like, it doesn't matter what you were taught as a child and who you were raised by. This gives you the opportunity to level the playing field, because this education will work in any situation, any income level, any neighborhood can benefit from children who are taught leadership and taught entrepreneurship. And so some of our kiddos have really had the opportunity to come up to us and say, like, I'm started out very shy, very sheltered, very closed in on themselves, and are now outgoing, doing public speaking engagements, and really developing their business and their brand, because they have at some point met me and learned that there is an adult in their corner cheering them on and providing them the education and support they need to prove that their potential is not just the generations before them or just their environment, but really where they want to go in the future. So I do think one of our future programs we really want to do is partnering with our local foster youth placement center. So these kids who have run away from foster homes or been asked to leave foster homes and are now living in this kind of like stylized summer camp and essentially just a youth home, working with those kids to develop their self-confidence, their problem solving, and seeing that a lot of the things that we as educators will call behaviors, the things that we want out of the children, those behaviors are all methods of communication and trying to get something, and being able to teach them that they can get that something through these more positive aspects when we teach them this leadership and these problem solving skills.
Have you found that to be the case, that inversely to children who were perhaps more introverted and less keen to engage with society, children who were perhaps showing, as we say, behaviours of concern, behaviours in which they perhaps had problems with impulse control, with emotional regulation, have you found that being placed in a position of responsibility where an adult says to them, I believe in you, but you ultimately have to make the right choices here, so choose wisely, actually helps them learn about personal discipline and learning how to engage with society?
Actually, the perfect example of this is my second daughter. She has ADHD combined, which means she is super high active and super inattentive. But she is a different child when she is sitting in front of her business booth. She does face painting, and her attention to detail, her ability to talk to these customers and hold a conversation is absolutely mind-boggling. It's just amazing to see that when she looks at herself and she sees I'm representing my business, all of the focus and all of the pride that she puts into that. And that's just one child. And there are so many more kids that we get to work with that are able to say, like, I'm not just a kid, I am a business owner. And this is the reputation I'm building for myself.
That's an excellent example of how learning experiences and also learning the right ideas about life and learning the value of them can really help us, whoever we may be. Innately, human nature is actually, I won't say simple, that would be an oversimplification to use the word simple too many times, but it's simpler than academic theory tends to postulate. The human mind operates on relatively basic principles, and then the vast range of different human behaviors, human functionings that we see are effectively extrapolations and derivatives of those basic tendencies. We have a need to survive, and we have different tendencies that are based on that need. So in order to allow us to survive, we need to be distracted from the anxieties of life. So we seek security, we seek beliefs to provide security, we seek senses of reassurance, we seek connections with others, which is not to say that we have so much selfish desires, as to say that that can explain why we do what we do. This often turns the theory on its head that children can't take responsibility, because what people don't see is that from an early age, we have a desire to better ourselves in order to help us survive and thrive in life, let our creativity blossom, for example. And so one of the best ways that children learn that is by seeing someone else believe in them, because they see the virtue of believing in oneself in somebody else. If I see you believing in me, then what I see is I am worth believing in. Children learn that through experience. I'm curious though, what do you think it is about being in a position of responsibility, like in a business, that makes the penny drop, so to speak, that leads children to learn, hey, this has value, or I can use this as an opportunity to improve other areas of my life. What do you see in children's development as they're engaging in this type of project?
So I think for me, there's that old saying, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. And we sit these kids up and we tell them that they can. And so then they have this room full of adults who have put real money in their hands and told them, we think you are worthy of this thing you made getting real money. And then allowing them the opportunity to play the boss. And they don't understand in that moment the impact that it has on their entire future. They understand that they're making money today. So for the kids, it feels very low pressure. It feels like if I succeed, I've got money. If I fail, I have less money. Like, this is not a high risk for me, and this is fun. But for the adults, we're able to see all the things we're building in them in this low risk, safe environment. And I think that's why it is so effective, because we're doing something that the kids are truly engaged in, and we can kind of prod in all these skills that we know they're going to need as adults.
So effectively what happens, and this is something that is discussed quite often and we're starting to understand the value of this more, is rather than placing pressure on children and thinking it's going to teach them the skills for life, when we place too much pressure on children, it actually affects their executive functioning potentially, so that any learning that may have otherwise happened is likely to be less or non-existent, because a child's mind can only do so much, and that's a normal part of development. We can't expect more than what any person is capable of at any age. But by removing that pressure and instead framing it as an enjoyable activity, children learn the values from the start, so that by the time they're an adult and they have to start facing more of the stresses of life, they already have instilled in them psychological habits that will facilitate that. So effectively, you've taught them the values that they need, you've taught them the skills that they need, but you've taught them more effectively than if you were treating them as if they were an adult.
Well, and not treating it like a classroom. We do have classes, and we sit in classrooms, and we have lectures, and we have discussions, but every one of those starts with a story and ends with a discussion where the kids are really applying it to their own businesses. And it's not me standing in front of the room teaching them some business theory and expecting them to ace a test on it. It's me giving them information that they'll then figure out how they want to apply to their own businesses. And then the test is them going out and making real money. There's no pressure in that from me. That is all of them setting their own goals. The kids get to set their own goals, and all I do is give them information to facilitate them reaching their goals, not my goals.
I know, Leah, that you've been working with children, so I'm not sure how much of this you may have seen, but what's your evaluation of how to balance that approach with also ensuring that children do learn to manage risk? Because unfortunately, some things can only be learned through direct experience. And so if a person has had too easy a life, although too easy is something of a misnomer, I mean too easy as in one that hasn't involved many hardships, it can be difficult to adapt when those hardships do happen in the future. What do you think is an effective means of balancing not expecting too much of children so that they can learn those skills in a healthy way and be able to actualize them when it matters most in their adulthood, while also not shielding them from the dangers of life so that they can learn what they need to learn through direct experience?
I think it throws the parents off sometimes, but I encourage the parents to allow their children to fail. There are going to be days that your child's business is going to fail. Melody had the worst sales day of her life on her 10th birthday. I had to watch her sit through her birthday on a terrible sales day. But Melody did not decide to shut down her business after having the worst day of her life on her birthday. Instead, she came up with different ways to do her marketing and different products to add so that she would have a better experience in the future. As much as it hurts as a parent to let your child fail, this is another one of those times when the risk is so low, allowing them to practice the failure here and become familiar with that disappointment and then the bounce back of problem solving. They can do it in this low risk environment now, but they're building those skills so that as an adult in a high risk experience, when they have a failure, they know that these key skills I've taught still apply. We still fail and we still look for new solutions. We still offer some damage control and we still figure out what our next steps are to progress. Teaching that to the kids now in these low risk children's business fairs, markets that don't go the way they want them to, enables them to know in the future that failure isn't scary and they know how to safely move forward from it.
That's an excellent philosophy. I was wondering if you could share with us some de-identified stories of some of the biggest positive changes that children have had after engaging with your program.
I think the biggest one we have is a young girl with participated in some self-harming behaviors, was very not just introspective, but very closed off, and not comfortable around strangers or groups. And watching her slowly start talking to the booths around her, and then starting to talk to the customers, and then standing up in front of a crowd and speaking to strangers on behalf of her business, and seeing that progression from her as she's slowly building in that confidence because she's created a new identity for herself as a successful business owner.
That's excellent. You both should be proud of facilitating those kinds of changes in people's lives. That's an excellent life achievement.
Oh, she's amazing. And so many of the kids that we work with are just not only successful because I'm proud of the businesses that they've created, but successful because I'm proud of watching the things that they've learned to do for themselves and to offer their communities. Because the child entrepreneurs we work with are highly attuned at being able to identify problems, and then instead of complaining, seeking and creating solutions to those problems. And I think that's one of the most important things for both their resilience and the development of our community and our society as a whole, is having more people who are actively creating solutions.
Excellent. Now, I don't like to dwell on the negative aspects of anything, including life, but something about which I'm most passionate is challenging questionable or destructive ideas. And in any domain, in any pursuit which we have in life, there are going to be people who question us. There are going to be people who have a negative outlook. And I am very much an approach rather than avoidance coping type of person. I encourage people, if something bad happens, avoiding it because it makes you uncomfortable is not going to help. We have to face it. There is much polarization between people of different life philosophies that encompass religion, politics, ideology, all of these different manufactured beliefs effectively. Have there been any negative reactions to what you do, such as parents dismissing it or any types of politically motivated judgments that you've had to face?
Exactly one. And it was over the fall. We participated. I had 4 kiddos working a booth, participating in our local Renaissance festival. And I invited some people over and was like, come check out our child businesses. And they told me, we will not support your child labor and your exploitation of these children. And the kids were all like, no, we want your money. Come shop with our stuff. This isn't child labor. And so I think that's been the only thing we've ever had to combat, is what makes child entrepreneurship different than child labor. And the fine line that I tell people is child labor is me forcing her to work so that I can get more money. Child entrepreneurship is her saying, I want to sell this thing I made because I want money. It's very child driven. And it has got very little to do with me for her to be a child entrepreneur. Whereas child labor would be very all about me and how I can exploit her.
The fact that you've been able to win so many hearts and minds speaks volumes about your skill, because most endeavors of this kind would attract controversy regardless of how important and valid they are, because people love creating controversy. It's a sport. This is a learning opportunity, an opportunity to learn about the bases and the workings of certain ideologies. So claiming that child entrepreneurship is equivalent to child labor, I don't like to put words in people's mouth, but I'm going to take a wild guess that this person was thinking that anything that involves money is somewhat exploitative and somewhat evil. But think about the extension of that logic. All of us have to function in an economy whether we like it or not. If you tell someone that money is evil and they never learn to manage it, they're not going to survive. But if you teach someone to manage it responsibly, not only will they survive, they'll also not be part of the problem that money facilitates, which is greed and taking away from other people's lives. And it's also important to realize that there's a phenomenon known as learned helplessness. If our minds are exposed to the idea that we are nothing but the influence that the system, so to speak, has on us, then our brains will adapt to that belief so that all throughout our lives, we will only be drawing on the information that suggests that we are helpless and that the system will control us no matter what. And we will ignore all the evidence that we actually have our own choices. And that is, and if we want to say trust the science, that is the science. Our brains do function that way. Evolutionarily, we have to position our focus in as fine a manner as possible because we can't focus on everything at once. If we tried to, we wouldn't be able to survive. We need to have focus. So our brains try to cut through the clutter, so to speak, by focusing on what we believe is most likely to be true. So it's important that we know what our choices are and what our own capabilities are. And especially from an early age, we have to know that we are capable of making choices. And the more we know that, the more likely we are to actually have what we want in life and live a healthy, happy life, because we can actually do things to make it happen and not just allow it to happen.
Right, exactly. But there's always, we all are so full of our own bias, and we're always going to be looking for that confirmation bias of, oh, I knew it. I knew I was right. I knew it. And so that is exactly part of what we are teaching. And one of the programs we have is on entrepreneurship as a way to be a steward for your community, and entrepreneurs solving problems for their community and giving back to their community. Because I teach all of the kids, money is nothing but a tool. Money is just like a hammer. It has a job. You use it to reach your goals. If your goal is to make the world a better place, then your money is a tool to make the world a better place. How can you use it? And so you just have to look at it and kind of you don't have a lot of emotion around the hammer in your toolbox. And so removing some of that emotion around the money, because it is not innately good or evil. It is simply a piece of paper or some numbers on a digital banking statement.
That's a perfect analogy. Also, tell us about the S.O.C.E circle that you've started. You just had your first event today. What's it all about?
Right. So S.O.C.E is the abbreviation for Society of Child Entrepreneurs, and we call it the S.O.C.E circle. And it started out, if you're familiar with the concept of a Socratic circle and how everybody is an equal in that space and they're all working to solve problems together. It started out as part of how we ran our regular meetings, was with a S.O.C.E circle where everybody had to follow the same ground rules and everybody had the same voice. But as we are offering more programs in more places, we didn't want to be only people in Kansas can benefit from this, because child entrepreneurship, child leadership, financial literacy, these are global needs. These are things that everybody can have access to. So we created a digital version of the S.O.C.E circle that is an online community, has access to lesson plans. Child entrepreneurs can talk to each other about building their businesses. All of that surrounding building more child entrepreneurs. So youth leaders, educators, homeschool families, all of them can get in there and just download lesson plans and go teach this child entrepreneurship wherever they are. But they also have access to a community where Melody can get in there and she can say, I'm having a really tough time figuring out how to solve this problem. Have any other entrepreneurs had this problem, and how did you solve it? And so we can create this global community of entrepreneurs of all ages working together to solve problems and ultimately make the world a better place, right?
Absolutely. And what that teaches us also is that there are more people out there willing to help us than we may initially think. We just have to ask for it. And much of the networking that I do involves asking other businesses if they can potentially refer clients to me, or asking people if they'd want to be on my podcast, and then people such as yourself asking me if you can be a guest on the podcast. This is how we help each other, and there's more willingness to assist than we actually realize, because too often we're too scared to ask for help, or we're too scared to ask to make an exchange. So it's so important to learn that from the start. It teaches personal responsibility, and it teaches that the world is not a perfect place, but perhaps more friendly than we might assume it is.
Absolutely. And I think with the S.O.C.E circle, being able to have this online community, it's a way for me to show people that there are fewer boundaries between who we are. There's more commonalities, and it gives us an opportunity to identify these commonalities and grow on those rather than focusing on the differences.
Absolutely. Leah, are you able to tell us anything about the future of the Society of Child Entrepreneurs? Where are things looking?
So the biggest thing right now is working on more podcast appearances, getting more outreach so that we can have a better global reach and reaching entrepreneurs in more places. And then continuing our book series so that we have more opportunities for kids to sit down with a picture book and just sit down with their picture book and have a story that helps them see themselves as entrepreneurs. And finally, we are writing a curriculum that is 36 weeks that will take you through an entire school year of developing from the very basics of what is an entrepreneur and what are the traits that an entrepreneurship needs, all the way into having your own children's business fair and hosting these kids selling their own products. That's the big one. I just did my first pilot lesson for that. And my hope is to have that out by the 2027-2028 school year for people to be able to use. Melody has set a lofty goal this year because she wants to publish a book.
You can tell us about your book if you'd like, Melody.
So I wrote a book a little while ago. It was just like a little rough draft, and I didn't actually plan on getting it published. Then Mom got her book published, and I realized I can get this published. So I started writing a bigger copy last week, and I hope to get it in hands by Christmas. It's about a girl who leaves her kingdom with 3 of her best friends to go collect allies for the war that's been going on for 5 years, which is 1/3 of her life. First of all, she ends up slaying a dragon and becoming a queen of dragons.
Yeah, she literally is a 15-year-old dragon slayer.
That's a fantastic storyline, and people will certainly learn from that. Does it have a title yet?
Yes, it's called Slayer.
Fantastic. Was there anything happening in the world that inspired you to write that, or was it more based on what you've seen children be able to do when they're given the chance, like what you've done with the Society of Child Entrepreneurs?
There are some sections I kind of just like wing it and don't like really choose from any certain perspective. But then there's also some spots I feel like there's this one section when she's talking to her parents about going out to slay a dragon so that the dragons will be their allies. I think when she's like, her dad's like, "You're too young to do this," and she's like, I think I probably am to most people, and I actually am scared and I'm not ready, but I'm going to go anyway because I know it's the right thing.
That's fantastic. There is so much that people can learn from that, not just children, but I think also adults, in learning to believe in children and learning that sometimes the only way you can learn about how to live is by taking those risks and learning from whatever happens at the end of it.
Well, and sometimes you have to do it even when you're scared.
There is one more story that I really enjoy to tell. So we were at a workshop and we were talking about solving problems problems, because most entrepreneurs' businesses solve a problem. So we were learning about how to solve different problems. One of the problems we were given was porch pirates. And some people do have like little boxes that they put on their porch and tell people to put the packages in, but the people who are delivering the packages are on a tight schedule and they can't do that. So then the porch pirates get their package. So we came up with, at first, the little box has arms to put stuff in it. But people can still just steal the box that the package is in. So now the box is bolted to the ground and it's the shape, it's like a circular box with a head, and it's still got its arms. It reaches out to grab the package. It puts it in its stomach, and when you get home, it recognizes your voice, face, or fingerprint, and it grabs that, and it gives you your package. And Mom said, I don't think you guys are going to be able to do this. And then when the 11-year-old in the group said, I'm in a robotics club, I can do it.
Yeah, I had an 11-year-old look me straight in the face when I challenged her ability to create something, and she said, I'm in robotics club, I'll figure it out. And so Melody loves to tell this story about how these three girls solved the problem, including my confidence in them.
Well done, you. Did you get a prototype?
They did not. I had to firmly tell them afterwards, remember, this one is just theory. Please don't go to robotics club and try and build a robot. So they did not make prototypes, but I think if I leave them alone for too long, they probably will. But it's amazing when we really ask more questions of the kids, the things that they do. So the parting words that I do whenever I do a speaking engagement, whenever I do a podcast, I always end with the same thing. If you want one small action that you can do when you're working with children, and sit down with them and ask them about one problem that they see in their community or in their lives and how they would want to see it to be solved. And then when they tell you what problem they want solved, ask them how and don't ask them why. And then if it is something that is feasible that you think you could actually help them do, go out and support them in making that change, because that's how we encourage them to continue being leaders, is by letting them see that the ideas they already have are being taken seriously.
And if you see a problem in your community, go out and try and help start a business to solve it. As long as you're not breaking household rules, then just go ahead, jump in. And to the parents, if one of your household rules is don't start a business, then unless your kid already has 1,000 businesses, don't make that a rule. That's a really stupid rule.
Spoken like a true professional, Melody, and fantastic last words for the interview, Leah. Well, with that, Leah and Melody, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been an absolute pleasure to speak to you, and we're all really excited to see where these new programs go for you. But you're already doing fantastic work, and I hope that the future for you is nothing but more of these achievements and more people learning the virtues of entrepreneurship.
Thank you so much for having us.
It's my pleasure. And to our audience, thank you so much for joining us. As usual, if you do have concerns about anyone, yourself or somebody else, please seek the advice of a professional or somebody else that you trust. And if you are inspired by something that you heard on today's program or any episode, please feel free to contact me. I would love to hear from you. I love to hear from my audience feedback. Anyone who wants to be a potential guest, anyone who would like to challenge anything that they may have heard, I value analytical discussion. And Leah, I believe you're also looking for podcast opportunities at the moment.
Absolutely. If you want me to come to your audience and tell them all about how amazing these child entrepreneurs can be, I would love to discuss it with you.
Leah's website will be in the description of this episode. Thank you, everybody, and until next time, take care.